Hello, I'm Diane Keppel, CEO of Portfolio Plus, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our new podcast episode. Recently, Donna Galloway, Vice President of Marketing for Portfolio Plus, had the opportunity to sit down with Michelle Bale, founder and CEO of Finnovator. Finnovator is an award-winning strategy firm focused on bridging the gap between fintechs and traditional banks. Today's podcast focuses on their conversation about the open banking movement and the importance of open banking for Canada. I'm really looking forward to this episode, so over to you, Donna and Michelle.
Hi, my name is Donna Galloway, and I oversee the branding and marketing for Portfolio Plus. Our banking software products and services create value for financial institutions, so in return, they can drive growth and outstanding customer experiences. Today, I'm joined by Michelle Bale. Michelle is the CEO and founder of Finnovator, an award-winning fintech and payments consultancy. Now, I really need to do Michelle justice with her background and read this. Very impressive, Michelle, and very proudly read just now. Michelle is also a strategic advisor to fintechs, a Money 2020 Rise Up alumni, a Global Council member of Women in Payments, the membership chair at Canadian Prepaid Providers Organization, a payment advisor at National Crowdfunding and Fintech Association of Canada, and a board member at Open Banking Initiative Canada. With over 20 years of extensive financial industry experience, Michelle started Finnovator. She's passionate about payments and financial inclusion. Most recently, Michelle was named the top 30 best CEO in 2021, or part of the top 30 best CEOs in 2021 by the Silicon Valley Review, and awarded Most Influential Leader in FinTech Consulting 2020 Canada by Corporate Vision. Wow, that was awesome, Michelle, to read, and quite impressive. I'd appreciate if you'd give a few more minutes to talk about Finnovator, your company you founded, and perhaps your client base and the services you provide and such.
Thank you, Donna. It is such a pleasure to be here with Portfolio Plus and you this morning to chat about open banking and Finnovator. I actually started the organization just almost 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. And I started the organization because I spent 20 years in the corporate space, 6 years in telco, 8 years in online shopping affiliate marketing, running Alaska Lufthansa, Delta United online shopping mall platforms, then working with CIBC Bonus Rewards to extend out their restaurant, spa, and golf course program, followed by helping conceptualize and launch Aeroplan's first Shop Local back in 2014. And then I jumped into payments with not a lot of knowledge of payments, but I jumped into an organization that is the largest prepaid organization globally. And working in their Canadian international head office, I had the ability to work with major organizations facilitating their digital gift card and physical gift card infrastructure. So getting to work with Walmart and 7-Eleven, Visa, MasterCard, Uber, helping launch the Uber card in Canada, getting to see the impact that prepaid had on bringing the underserved to services, especially with online infrastructure, and actually got to launch WeChat for 7-Eleven back in 2017. And then I got quite nervous that my kids were going to end up with Asian banking if the infrastructure and innovation in North America didn't accelerate to try and compete with the innovation that was happening in Asia Pac. And I took a leap of faith and jumped into the blockchain space at a company that was focused on digital ID and consent on blockchain for GDPR compliance, which led me to open banking. So being the chief client officer at this blockchain company through a year that became crypto winter, I was not only able to see the startup world, I was able to see what the impact and possibilities of blockchain were, as well as what data consent meant and ownership of data or digital ID. And I realized that after winning Money 2020 Rise Up, I had the passion and the want to create my own organization where I could take all of this back knowledge and help not just one company, but help many, and truly trying to help organizations innovate faster. So Finnovator was created to help banks, credit unions, fintechs, and corps to work better together to drive innovation for consumers and SMEs. And I've had the pleasure of doing that and growing my team over the last 3 years, largely working with one big Canadian bank, one large New York NASDAQ listed bank, about 15 different fintechs, an array of global IT partners, as I'm trying to help drive that innovation in 3 different ways, either through product innovation, intelligent marketing, as well as strategic sales. With most of my clients, I do all 3, but some need one aspect of our services to try and push them forward.
Wow, so many questions I could come up with, but we're here about open banking today, so I'll stick to subject. Amazing background. How did you end up involved with Open Banking Initiative Canada? Well, you have a lot on your plate and you're moving forward your clients. And was it a need because your clients needed an open banking platform and to have that understanding? Where did it come from?
You know, it's quite interesting. I was actually at a conference with A.L. Savant, who's also on the board at OBIC. And at the time, he was still at CIBC. And we were at a conference and we ended up standing outside having a coffee and missing the rest of the conference because we were just talking about the impact and possibilities of open banking based on what it had done for the UK, what it was starting to do for Australia. And this was even before Brazil started to move forth. And he joined the OBIC, introduced me to the founder, Christian. And in August of 2020, I was asked to join the board. And Hannah from Wealthsimple, who's now the chief compliance officer, was also on the board. But it was 7 men and 2 women, so a 9-person board. And I asked, though it was my first board, I asked Christian if he would be open to have a 50-50 board initiative. And he's like, I have 2 teenage daughters. I couldn't think of a better initiative. Absolutely. And I said, I'm happy to help find these women to equal out the board. And I did so. So I'm really excited that OBIC actually became a 50-50 board with C-level female representation as of December of 2021, 1 year after we took on the initiative. And we didn't lose the other board members. We just created an advisory committee and some of the other board members moved there. So for me, it was passion. I foresee the human data right as the path to the future to ensure not only ourselves, but our kids get to own their data. In the same similar situation, I guess I'll give you a description of open banking in my sense, is allowing for a consumer or a business to have the right to their data, to be able to port it where they need it, to save money, to understand their finances, and to plan for the future, as well as to be able to revoke it once the service they received is either no longer needed or doesn't have the same value. So to give an example, I like to use telco. I used to be 6 years in telco in 99 and onwards, and you weren't able to port your number. So if you left one telco to another, you had to lose your identity and get a new number just because you wanted a better service or you wanted a cheaper service or you wanted better, let's say, coverage. But when they created the ubiquitous ability to have a number swap and move from one telco to the other, you were able to take your identity, your phone number with you. You didn't need to know how they did it or the infrastructure of how they did that. You just knew that you were allowed and that you could just go to a new telco, take that new service that was more competitive, more suited for you, and have it transfer in 20 minutes without any challenge on your consent. And that is the goal of not just open banking, but open telco and open finance and open data. You're in charge to move that data to get that service and that intelligence of the information you've collected of your financial history to make sure that that new bank can give you the same product or better because they can understand who you are.
You make it sound very exciting and very innovative for Canada to hop on this wagon. And there has been talks and there has been, we'll call it snail pace movement in the industry. And in amongst that, there's been talk about, maybe we should go right from open banking now to open finance, to open data, as you alluded to earlier. And Why do Canadians, like if you could make it in one statement, why do Canadians need open data?
To access the services that they deserve. When you look at Australia, if I could bring in an example, in Australia, they're a Commonwealth. They also have a set number of banks. They also they've had a very stable infrastructure, but they made a choice to move as the first country in the world to open data. And their date of their first open banking aspect of that was June of 2020. The pandemic happened in March, as we all well know, yet they didn't miss their date. They didn't use any excuses. They just ran forth to facilitate the date of starting open banking, followed by they're now on a mission to open finance, open telco, and open energy, and are leading the world in the concept and accessibility of a safe and secure API for data portability and giving the right to the actual citizen through regulation, and therefore have a very succinct movement of timelines and initiatives so that consumers can get access to competitive pricing, new competitors, fintechs being accredited so that they have access to the same pipe of safe data versus having to use something like screen scraping, which I think in Canada has moved somewhere between 4 million to possibly 6 million or more, as more and more Canadians are using fintechs, but they're just unaware that when they are signing in, they're using a screen scraping service that is breaching their contract with their banks and leaving them open to challenges that they don't need to have, really. If they had a safe and secure way to share their data so that they could have a dashboard of their financial services, or they could access, I think this is my favorite example as a business owner. If I'm using my accounting system and I have 12 different services from telco to credit cards to different banks that I need to feed into this accounting system, I don't want to download my PDF of my statement to upload to get my information times 12 times 26 to just get the picture I need. I don't have time. 98% of businesses in Canada are small to medium-sized businesses. If they're wasting or spending dollars to facilitate that action, we're behind Australia, the UK, and Brazil because their business owners get to use an aggregation tool that is safe and secure and not putting them at breach of all of their, financial contracts.
And it really is a global movement. And my team and I, when we banter about the subject, there's been a debate that happens about banking as a service compared to open banking, both leveraging an API. One, which was a good description, is one is an access to the banking tools, and the other is access for consumers to their own data through an API set. So we've bantered the fear of maybe open banking won't happen because banking as a service is taking off, and that's what the fintechs are using to interact with institutions and such. But I don't think that covers small businesses. I don't think it covers open finance and thus open data. Do you have any observations on that and experience?
Yeah, so I think it's hitting a small subset of its opportunity. When you regulate or you implement a safe and secure way with a standardized API, you give access to more than just one company who's built private contracts with the banks. What you're doing is driving innovation. When you look at the UK and Canada from a VC perspective, they're almost like 50x the investment because there's so many unicorns and fintechs that have emerged out of the UK because they were able to go down the accreditation path and facilitate access to this pipe. If we do this through a business like banking as a service infrastructure, it's only the tech players who've built private relationships with the banks to get access to their API one by one. It's extremely costly. It's not it's not reusable for any other path. So we're keeping the innovation circle very small. And therefore, the long-term perspective of that, as the world goes to open data, is that the Canadian fintechs and Canadian organizations are pigeonholed to a small subset without potential global growth. And our market doesn't truly then get to understand what this open banking, open finance, open data infrastructure can enable. And if we're competing with countries who already have it, we will always be behind.
And that makes sense. And in your bio, you mentioned the underserviced, the referred to as the underbanked and such, that you have a passion to help that along. And I think of somebody coming to Canada that loses all of their valuable information. And if Canada were to get on this global network, if you will, of open banking, then that information could be used to qualify them, to let them get established better, to, access that information to help them purchase a home sooner and get rent references and such. So,
yeah, I think that there's a great example of even just Americans crossing the border with very high credit score, not being able to buy a car without buying it for cash because they have no credit. So I think when you look at that, keeping it to banking as a service keeps it really small, and it keeps it to the same subset of services. But when you open up the pipe to give a fintech to have to be accredited, to have all of these check marks, you're making it easier for the banks to want to partner with them because they don't have to do their own due diligence to the same degree, because it will lift up the fintechs within the ecosystem. And some fintechs are just focused on one subset of the underserved, and that's their business model. And it will never make financial sense for a bank to just focus on that subset. So by not making it accessible to all who can facilitate the accreditation, you're still leaving out the underserved and pockets that fintechs are serving and still can't get access to the core pipes.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I know you've been instrumental through the OBIC, Open Banking Initiative Canada, moving along knowledge and information and education of open banking. And recently there's been a Roundtable initiative that has taken off. Would you mind providing some more insights into what that was about and the catalyst as to why it's happening?
Yeah, thank you. Well, Donna, honestly, when we started January, we looked back at all of the insights and education we were able to facilitate as a non-for-profit organization with our mission at OBIC to help the underserved, to help the consumer, and to help SMEs and the entire ecosystem work together for open banking, open finance to be a force of good for the ecosystem. And we've done a 99-page manifesto on a force of good with global data that is available for free on the OBIC Canada website. And we've also done infographics and articles on the consultation paper coming out with the roadmap on August 4th from the finance minister, and even Biden's executive order that came out in July before we had our consultation paper. So really just trying to help the ecosystem understand open banking in small bite-sized forms to really try and move the ecosystem forward. And as we looked at having the fact that we have now a potential roadmap, a consultation paper in January, what we still didn't have yet was the open banking lead, an accreditation framework, or the data privacy laws to facilitate data portability. And it was actually in one of our weekly chats as OBIC members in early January, where what are we missing to actually move this forward at a fast and secure pace? And what was missing is a Bill C-11, some type of regulation that would allow for data sharing to happen. So the catalyst for that roundtable was really to discuss Bill C-11, why it had not moved forward, what parts of it were crucial to help open banking and open data. And we're able to, thankfully, have Senator Deakin, who I've done a podcast series with, or a YouTube series with 10 different episodes focused on the UK's advantages over Canada because of the fact that they have open banking. So he was able to join us, as well as Andrew Moore from EQ Bank, and our ecosystem, like yourselves, as well as many other members from EPAM to Axway, to other. We just got League Data actually joining us this week. So we're trying to get to credit unions, as well as to ecosystem players, tech players, banks, and bring them all together to really talk about data portability. And thankfully, we had Cindy Zhang from BLG, who's an advisor to OBIC and a lawyer for the financial service sector, join us from a regulatory perspective and help lead through the discussion of the parts of Bill C-11 that were very crucial. And what we then did after that first kickoff meeting was send a letter to the finance minister asking that data portability be considered to be added to the bill, the Budget Implementation Act of 2022, to allow for the legal aspects of data portability to be facilitated as a first step to get us closer to open banking. And we're happy to share that it was received. We were thanked for the idea. I don't know if it's going to be implemented, but I think the ecosystem is trying to work together. So we continue to have these monthly meetings. We're happy to have anybody who's not a member to join us to be a part of this discussion so that we could refine the comments and try and give this to, thankfully, our new Canadian appointed open banking lead, Abraham, who was appointed in mid-March, to hopefully take as an industry to move us there faster, because other markets in the world like Australia, Brazil, and the UK had mandates with regulation that forced out specific dates. And in Canada, we're still on this market-led perspective. So if we're going to be market-led, we very much need to have a cohesive voice that is trying to move all of the pieces across the line and get all of the comments and insights so that we can make a Canadian open banking infrastructure for all.
Yeah, you say market-led. Absolutely agree. We need regulatory body in there to help define how open banking should go forward. But there are a lot of people that have gone on that march regardless of the regulatory guidelines, if you will. How far along do you think Canada is market-driven along the open banking path? So when we do get it in place, and that's a further question for you, is the when. But how do you see the industry being able to react to, perhaps, is regulatory standards being written that we're not aware of, or do you think it will all have to come together to get to where we need to be globally?
Yeah, I can say I'm quite jealous of Australia, Brazil, and the UK. I mention them often. Not all of it was right, but we have the opportunity to learn from all three markets, which are all quite different, yet had many successes. And I guess I'm quite excited to learn from all of those successes and how do we make our infrastructure and our path very clear, intentional, with time boxes. Because when you look at the UK moving forth in 2017, being a first mover, they didn't get it all right. But what they did have the opportunity to do is move forward, learn, and continue to iterate, and had very incredible use cases come out of it, which we can get into. When you look at Australia being a market that, hasn't been known for fintech or innovation, maybe stability, but definitely not for innovation, and then take a path to move forth in regulation to have an open data new world vision, and then facilitate it on path, on time, with mass oversight. And then you look at Brazil, who in the middle of COVID made a decision from the central bank and government to move forth with open banking, and then facilitated it in 12 months. Not multiple. Wow. There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of hard work, but everyone came to the table to facilitate an ecosystem for the people, for their businesses, and for access. And I'm Brazil is not known for execution. But they came together as an ecosystem, and now they're one of the world leading open banking infrastructures moving towards open finance. So I think there's a lot to learn. I'm excited to hear the path and how we're going to get there, but there are pieces we still need. We still need that data portability, like we spoke about. We still need an accreditation framework, which is the next thing OBIC is going to draft. Nobody's asked us to draft this document, but we're going to work with CIO Council, our members, and Global Insights to draft something to hopefully get us there faster. Because I think all of these pieces, if we're going to be market-led, we have to lead, and we have to find time and voices to ensure that we cover all aspects, so that we do have an ecosystem that is for many instead of a few.
It sounds like I'm going to say, a bit of a pot of gold at the end of this open banking journey, because like you said, Brazil jumping on it and turning around so quickly. It's, I don't know, some data varies, but 300 to 500 fintechs that are on the open banking network within the UK. And we've witnessed in Canada fintech attempting to come in and parking it until we're better ready for them and such. Do you think there's going to be a lot of job creation, a lot of economy cultivated out of this happening, this initiative? Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the UK or Brazil, the amount of dollars of investment of new companies, of added business models, of additional services, and even when you look at the UK, because I've done a lot of research on it, the CMA 9 have not fallen off the top 100 list. They have, many of them have moved up over the 5 years because of their fintech partnerships or investments or new business models. So I think there's quite a bit of advantages for the banks. If we just talk about KYC and AML, many banks have to do that onboarding process 7 times, right? Because they have 7 different products and 7 different departments, but they could use open banking internally for their own clients without having to have the cost of holding 7 data records for that same customer. So there's advantages that can be looked to find out ways on how banks utilize open banking to be more efficient internally and more innovative externally, as well as the fact that I mentioned, if fintechs are accredited, it can speed up the bank's partnerships with the fintechs to get the services their customers are looking for in a shorter period of time versus an 18-month roadmap. And they might have missed the mark. But if they have accredited fintechs they could partner with, they can get to market faster. So I think there's, in my opinion, advantages to all. And one of the use cases I actually enjoy the most is in the UK. They're at 5 million users of open banking at the moment. But I was speaking to Simon Lyons from Pay UK, who used to be at OBIE, and he was the one who was working directly with the government to figure out how they can use open banking for tax payments. And they were able to initiate by just adding a box on their tax payment infrastructure to say pay directly, or pay direct is what they called it. And then consumers could, and it was just called new, pay direct option. They clicked on it. It gave them open banking accessibility to facilitate that transaction, and that transaction not being lost, being actually marked directly to their tax number. And if thankfully I don't work in taxes, but what I've heard is that there is, like any business, if you're taking in mass amount of payments, there's going to be lost payments that need to then be investigated. And what this did was reduced those amounts of lost payments and got the money in faster, more efficiently. And the pickup rate was incredible. I'm looking forward to doing a case study so that we can share some of this data. But there's mass upside for government organizations through open banking as well.
Well, that's a wise use case too. Let Canada hear, let the government hear that they can get their tax money much easier and more efficient. Do you have a very innovative type of use case that you want to talk about today that you can think of?
I think the biggest thing, A, is if we could help the government get their taxes paid faster. B, if our SMEs could get their accounting to be seamless in the sense of how they collect their data. And then from a consumer standpoint, a quote that our founder, Christian, quotes often from 2019. So before the pandemic, most Canadians are $200 away from insolvency. I can't imagine what their number must be after the pandemic or while we still are coming out of the pandemic. But if they could have better visibility or have suggestions to financial services that are more suited to them to help them save or understand how to save for the future, then it's largely to ensure Canadians can have better options, more competition, as well as services or visibility in a way that will allow them to plan for their future.
Michelle, you've been so knowledgeable in this area, and I love the story about you wanting to have a 50-50 board to make sure that women are represented properly in the financial industry, let alone the technical industry. And I hope you keep that going for daughters all around the world and the next generation, as they say. If you had a crystal ball, do you have a when for open banking for Canada?
I'm a glass half full kind of person. So my hope is that because Canadians are innovative, because our ecosystem knows how to work together, we did implement the number portability within our telco infrastructure. We did implement, and we're one of the first to implement EMV cards for TAP back in 2015. So I'm hopeful that the ecosystem comes together and facilitates open banking within 2023 to start to move away from screen scraping and give Canadians and business owners an option to get access to their data. And also the biggest thing, Donna, is to be able to revoke their data when they no longer need that service. So I am hopeful that with Abraham and organizations like OBIC and organizations like Portfolio Plus and Leak Data and EPAM and all of these Axway and others that are coming together to try and work on their own time to drive this forth, that we will get to an opportunity for Canadians and our ecosystem to get in more VC dollars, to inspire more fintechs, and to have our banks flourish through innovation and through an access point that is secure and safe for all of us to facilitate financial services.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Donna.
What a wonderful and insightful conversation, ladies. Thank you, Michelle, for spending time with Donna on this important topic. To you, our audience, thank you for listening to this podcast episode. For more information, please visit our website at portfolioplus.com/podcast. If you have any feedback, please feel free to tweet to us at portfolioplus19 or like and share on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to our podcast series wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can add yourself to our mailing list, and we'll notify you when our next podcast episode is available. Until next time, all the best from the team here at Portfolio Plus.